This is the politics of everything, and I'm your host, Amber Daines. Welcome to the podcast where we want to discuss the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment to equality, and much more. Our guests are experts in their field or topic of choice, even if you've not yet heard their name. This is a bipartisan podcast, so while we love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate, by no means is this a one-sided forum for any one political view. So please listen up and enjoy the politics of everything. Diversity is certainly having its moment in the Australian business landscape. To discuss the politics of diversity, I'm chatting to Cathy, a freelance copywriter and the marketing communications manager for Dawn, a professional and social network that aspires to have an inclusive Australia with culturally diverse leadership across the public and private sectors. Cathy's worked for some of Australia's largest entities such as Westpac, Insurance Australia Group in roles across HR, corporate affairs and communications. Throughout her career, she's been vocal and active on matters relating to women, work and cultural diversity, and especially on smashing unconscious bias. Her experience of motherhood has deepened her passion in the area of diversity and inclusion. Motherhood has also made her connect more with her Vietnamese heritage, sense of identity, and the corporate ladder realities. When she's not wrangling words and fighting the diversity fight, she's chasing after her toddler. I warmly welcome her to the show. Welcome, Cathy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amber, for having me on the show.
Absolute pleasure. So tell us a bit about where your career began and where you've ended up.
Yeah, so I graduated with a degree in HR, which for a culturally diverse person was uncommon at the time. I think HR was a relatively new degree. And I chose that as a degree because I enjoy working directly with people and not crunching numbers. So there's a stereotype that most Asians are accountants or people in finance. So I kind of went the other route. I grew up in a conservative Catholic family, so I actually wanted to be something a bit more creative, so performing arts or writing. But in my parents' view, it's a very traditional view, it doesn't pay the bills. So I
love that.
I spent almost 10 years in HR before falling in love with the writing side of things. So I ventured into corporate affairs and communications, and here I am right now freelancing as a copywriter.
That's great. I love that path. And I think sometimes you've got to go somewhere else to end up where you're meant to be. That's kind of been my experience as well. So that's totally fascinating. So as a kid, how would you describe your childhood? And do you think being of Asian descent, was it something that benefited you, or did you find it a bit of a challenge growing up?
Yeah, so it benefited me in that I had an interesting lunch, or sometimes the smelliest. But growing up in the southwest of Sydney, which is home to the most diverse communities in Australia, it didn't affect me so much. I didn't look that different. But if I were to say in regional Australia, it would be a different story.
Yes.
But I would say that a challenge is that my family have always drilled it in me that I needed to work harder. I needed to study harder, get really good grades simply because I was different and because I was Asian. Even though I was born in Australia, I had the same access to education and everything. It was just because I was different. So it just meant that I had to work harder. I would get the odd slur from time to time where people would say, hey, go back to your country.
No.
Yeah. Like even these days as well, like I remember I was walking my son down the street. This happened a couple of months ago and, with prams they're quite wide. So sometimes it takes about 3/4 of the footpath. And then this lady just yelled at me and said, do I have to move to the side for you? Like, go back to your country. And I was just so shocked. And I just wanted to yell out and say, hey, mate, I was born here. But I didn't because my son was asleep, so I didn't.
Oh, your baby's sleeping. Never wake that. Even if it's coming across as you're avoiding your diversity challenges there. But I'm curious to know, to dissect a little bit more into idea that diversity is such a business focus now. And I know that plenty of companies that I work with as a consultant, big and small, recognize both the economic and social benefits of having a diverse workforce. Do you have any insight into why it's taken so long for this to be actually a conversation that we're having, given the fact that Australia has been a multicultural country for many decades?
Yeah, so I think it's great that it's a big focus now. So when I studied HR, it wasn't a focus at all. So I think it's good. We can't ignore the benefits, and we simply can't ignore the rising economies and the fact that Australia is in the Asia Pacific. But I think that there are many reasons why it's taken a little bit longer than we would like to. So it's taken long because Australia isn't as progressive as we'd like to think we are. I mean, it takes many years to make any sort of decision or implement any sort of change. An example would be matters of gender equality. We are still penalising working parents, and also recently the same-sex marriage. So it's taking this long just to get the yes vote. And it was only 10 years ago that Prime Minister Kevin Rudd recognised the stolen generation and apologised. So that's one thing. Another thing that I find is unconscious bias, which are, as you know, social stereotypes about certain groups of people. So because they are unconscious, people don't know, they're not aware of it. So I find that, that there's lots of common misconceptions in the workforce. An example that I can give is that Asians, people have this misconception that Asians lack ambition and they're not assertive and therefore don't have leadership aspirations. And it's due to their assumptions of what a leader should look or sound like, which is typically a white man. There's also flawed recruitment practices, which I've seen as well.
What would be an example of that? What would be a flawed recruitment process, do you think?
Yeah, so there's two parts to it. First part is unconscious bias. And the second part is that, studies have found that resumes with Anglo names are actually 3 times more likely to be invited for an interview compared to candidates with a Chinese name.
Casting, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And they take the resume names off. And it happens, I think, not only with race, but also gender, apparently, especially in STEM and areas like that where men traditionally have dominated.
And I've spoken to a lot of people where this has actually happened to them. So my cousin, she's born here and she married an Anglo guy, and his surname is obviously Anglo, so she took his surname. And then she found that she had so many phone calls for an interview compared to when she had her maiden name. And then when people actually saw her, they were like so shocked. They would actually say, "Oh, I didn't expect you to look like that."
That's incredible. Yeah, I think that must happen. And also, the way you look versus the way you sound, and if you've got an Australian accent versus an accent that might have a tinge of another culture mixed in, I think that often, can work both ways for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Amazing. Anything else on that point?
I'd also like to point out that people have this mindset that it's only a matter of time before something happens. So it's being complacent to believe that it's only a matter of time before cultural diversity is better represented, or a matter of time where we'll have a cultural diverse leader. And this relies on the assumption that everyone is playing on an even level playing field, and that the best person gets the job, which in most cases that's not true. So and knowing this makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable, like no one wants to admit that they have privilege.
Oh, of course not. And I think it kind of leads into my next point, which is one of my former guests on this show, Dr. Michael Kimmel, who calls himself the world's foremost male feminist. He's fantastic. He is often quoted as saying privilege is invisible to those who enjoy it. And I agree, but I do feel like sometimes if I was, for example, male and white and in a privileged sort of background, and women as well in that position, in the debate, you can often feel alienated and you think, well, if that's me and I'm hiring people, do I have to overcompensate? How do I actually make this work so we don't go so much the other way that we're being more tokenistic? And I guess we always worry about those appointments, whether it be in public life or in leadership roles, where there's an us and them kind of, vibe. So how do you think we can do this with full awareness, but also not to penalise people who may be very qualified for the job, but, they may be white, they may be male, they may be privileged?
I mean, I think it all comes down to how you view what a leader is, because you can be a leader and not have any direct reports or be accountable for anyone in particular. It all starts with you. That's what I believe. And you have to have an inclusive mindset. So what that is just mutual respect for everyone and being self-aware. Like, I mean, I do admit myself that I do have privilege. I mean, I've been privileged to go to a private school. I've been privileged to have education in which my parents' home country, many girls don't have that level of education. So, I mean, when you feel awkward about it, you will be awkward, if you know what I mean. So
I do. Yeah. That's a great way to put it, actually.
Yeah. Like, just don't be awkward about it. Just come with an inclusive mindset. Feel like, just treat everyone like they're equal. Don't be tokenistic. Don't think, this person's going to be like a diversity hire or something. Just treat everyone like you want to be treated.
That's great. I think that just comes back to human decency as well, which often is missing sometimes in the debate and the over intellectualization and the economic figures around why we need diversity. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's what we all strive for in a society.
Yeah. Treat everyone like humans. Don't be awkward.
So to talk a little bit about your hat with Dawn, that's part of one of the two jobs that you do. And it says we aim to create a professional network that advocate for and promote inclusive leadership from within Australia's culturally diverse workplaces, and making that, I guess, a bit of a goal in both the public and private sectors. It sounds like such a big, lofty thing. So what does that really involve for the company, and how do you even measure your success on that?
Yeah, I do agree that it's a big, lofty thing. Like, I feel that there's a bit of a diversity and inclusion fatigue right now. Like, people are just drilling in, hey, diversity, inclusion, there's so much benefits and all that. It does sound a little wishy-washy, but
it kind of reminds me of the corporate social responsibility debates a decade ago, and before that it was all about environmental accountability. So I think these things do go through phases, and it's not to sort of say they're not important, but I think you're right. You can only hear about something so much before you start to shut down a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel that people are fatigued about it, but then at the same time, there's no action. Dawn gets contacted many times, just say, hey, we want to do something, but then they're not accountable for it. They're actually not making decisions. And just really, it's kind of like the hot next big thing, a little bit like, hey, I want, I don't know, the next Louis Vuitton bag or something like that. Not to that extreme, but it doesn't seem to be making any decisions, anyone making any decisions. But besides that, what Dawn does, so Dawn consults as well. So we actually go into organisations and help their leadership pipelines and help educate them on the benefits of it and how they can grow the next pipeline of culturally diverse leaders. Sorry, I didn't say that right. So how do you measure success? It's not as straightforward, and there has been some debate around quotas versus targets, particularly with what's happening in Parliament at the moment. People talking.
I was going to say, it sort of mirrors the public and private sector, which is you're both focused on that within Dawn, but it's interesting how that's kind of mirroring each other a little bit. And people are either really one way or another. They're either really for or really against this quotas or targets, focus, I guess, for women or whatever the diversity target might be.
Yeah, so personally, I don't think quotas work that easily for culturally diverse leadership. And
why do you say that? I'm just going to pick you up on that. Why do you say that?
The reason why is you can be a white Anglo person, but you could have a very culturally diverse mindset. You could have worked in India, China, America. You would have had a wealth of knowledge, cultural knowledge, but you just look different versus someone that maybe Asian but living in Australia but has never travelled in their life and doesn't speak their mother tongue.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you can be culturally you can have a culturally diverse mindset but not have a culturally diverse heritage, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
it's not as clear cut. And plus, there's a lot of negative connotation towards the word quota as well. It suggests something that is policed. It's kind of like, I don't know, I kind of think of it as kind of force feeding someone something. It's
Yes.
yeah, versus targets. I feel is a bit more aspirational. It has something that it's something that you could look forward to.
Are we just playing with words though? Is it kind of just splitting hairs? I guess it's that thing of I've heard, just to go into the political realm, the Liberal Party, there are Liberal people in leadership there who say, yeah, we do need quotas, but we can't call them that because the Labor Party calls it that. So it's sort of that thing. So we're not going to do it, or they did it first. And so I guess if it gets you to the point you need to be, does it matter?
It doesn't matter. Well, that's my view on the definitions of each word and how it's perceived. But
Yes.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't feel like something should be forced down someone, forced onto someone. I feel that that's not the right approach. I think before you actually commit to something like that, you need to have, just going back to that inclusive mindset. So being mutually respectful of everyone and treating them like you want to be treated. Also, companies should collect meaningful data as well. So if you are committed to having culturally diverse leaders, collect data on their cultural heritage as well. So that way you could measure diversity and progress, and hold leaders to account. So yeah, just have like a diversity champion. So a lot of companies have what's called employee action groups. So where it's kind of like a social club, so to speak, where they talk about ways in which they could encourage like women in leadership or awareness of LGBTI, that sort of thing. So where I was working at before at Westpac, they had a number of employee action groups, 10 actually, where they had an executive sponsor, and yeah, they hold leaders to account for it.
That seems really not only like more appealing, but it just seems like something people would buy into more easily than sort of, I guess, a policy which might come from the top, if you like, or from a HR department, and then it's sort of forced upon you as well. Because I guess there's room for
Yeah.
discussion and human discussion as well as just the measuring and the feedback.
Yeah, and it also shows that everyone's responsible for this as well. It doesn't take someone that's at the top of the food chain to make all the decisions. It all starts at the bottom as well. It all starts with,
Absolutely,
yeah,
totally agree
you
with
as an
that.
individual.
So, do you think HR departments become bound by these hiring policies focused on diversity? And does it matter if that sort of happens, or like we say, do we have to just be more sort of, we want targets, but we don't have to do it this way? Like how accountable do you think we need to be to make this work for the long term? So it's not something that's like a flash in the pan where we have a moment of greatness and then we go back to our own old ways.
Yeah. So when I was in my HR role, I think it depends on your level of influence and the business that you are supporting. So I have seen where a lot of leaders are just, they're desperate to find someone to fill the role and they don't care. Sometimes they don't care about diversity, but we always have to go back to the principles and also what the values of the company is. So I think it takes a really good HR business partner and also very strong influencing skills to make this change. And also, of course, leaders need to buy into it as
Of
well. So,
course. Number one, I think that's the thing. And like you say, it
yeah,
comes at all levels. And I think keeping everyone accountable probably helps in the organization.
yeah. And when people are hiring, I find, I mean, it is a very emotional process. And I'm just going back to unconscious bias as well. That's inevitable. And also, it's just people are so used to hiring people that are like themselves that they forget everything else. They forget to think outside the box. So it's just kind of reminding people to refocus and relook at what's important.
Absolutely. So, in this path of seeking that true diversity in your workplace, can it backfire if companies don't fully engage their staff, or there's a big change, for example, all of a sudden, or perhaps all the leaders aren't sort of 100% committed to this? Is it kind of something we need to be conscious of, and how do you address that so it actually works and people don't turn around and say, "See, doesn't work"?
Yeah, so I mean, it can backfire. So we can say that within our political environment at the moment. I mean, there's lots of talk about diversity, but there's not much action there. The Google case as well, which happened not too long ago with that infamous memo about the idea on. Do you remember that case? I think you
No,
don't
do you
want
just
to.
want to share that with us?
Yeah, so one of the engineers shared a memo just via their social media platform. So he talks about how Google's diversity and inclusion programs are really extreme and authoritative. He argues that the reason why there's not many women in tech is because of their biological and cultural differences between men and women. And
Oh
therefore,
my
that
goodness.
plays a role in pay gap and lack of female representation.
Yes.
So, because that happened in the States, they have different laws around dismissing employees and HR processes. So, I think in that case, it did backfire because personally, I feel from an HR point of view, there were other ways to handle that situation. They actually ended up firing the guy because they viewed him as a reputational risk.
Oh, of course. I mean, especially when
Yeah,
it's something so public and social media just goes so widely.
yeah,
It's not like you can sweep that under the carpet and say, "Oh, he just said that in the kitchen at lunchtime."
yeah.
It's very public.
Yeah, but he did, I mean, not so public. It was within their internal social media
Oh,
platform.
okay. But I
So
would
it wasn't like it
imagine
was on Facebook or
no.
anything. It leaked.
Yeah, I was going to say there's always a leak. Like those, I don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the idea that it's a closed network always makes me laugh because I always my litmus test when I work with my clients in the communication space would be around if you don't want to see it on the front page of the newspaper, maybe don't post it or say it. It's that thing if you don't really know where that could go, people would take screenshots, whatever it might be. So yeah, I think once you put it out there somehow, it does have a life of its own. So that's also a lesson, I guess. If you do have some personal concerns and how you would deal with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I think also Starbucks made a really good stance recently as well. So they closed 8,000 stores a couple of months ago so that their employees can undergo unconscious bias training. Did you
Yes.
hear about
I
that
have heard a bit
case?
about this. And
Yeah,
what does unconscious bias training look like? Do you have to like take your brain out and wash it and put it back in? I mean, how do you do that?
yeah. So unconscious bias training, I mean, depends on the provider. There's a lot of unlearning as well, and
Yeah.
admitting privilege.
Which must be confronting for a workplace sometimes.
It is confronting. That's why not many people want to do it. It's a bit
Absolutely.
of denial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
I
mean,
can
it's not
see the
the,
benefits.
yeah,
It would sort of be like
yeah,
it's like when you go to therapy, like it's not necessarily something that's pleasant, but you hope it gets you where you need to get to in the end.
yeah. It's kind of like going to the gym or running a marathon. It's a painful process, but I mean the benefits are there. It's just that that pain.
Get through the pain, no gain, as they
Yeah.
say. So what would be a great example of a diverse workforce that has had amazing outcomes that maybe people would relate to? And is there a lesson for all of us in how we can do this a bit better?
Yeah, so the companies that I really love that I think are doing well are Qantas, Accenture, EY, Telstra. So they're doing some good things.
And
They're
they're all big
typically,
companies. They're all household name
yeah,
companies, obviously. So maybe they've
yeah,
got the resourcing as well. I'm just
yeah,
curious.
yeah, that too. Which is probably not good examples. I mean, they're good examples, but I should have pointed out some smaller companies. I mean, there's lots of smaller sort of companies as well. But the companies that typically do well are the ones that involve all their people across all levels. So I did mention before, like with the employee action groups as well, like having them, just making people feel that they're empowered to have a voice within the organization.
Yes.
It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, it's just, I guess it's like anything. Like you mentioned the gym before, like once you start doing it, those muscles get worked and it becomes normal.
Yeah, and then just view it as a positive thing. Like don't view it as, oh my God,
More
like this is
work.
unconscious bias training, boring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not sort of like your, fire safety induction process or something where you sort of,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a necessary
That's
evil, but it's pretty boring at the end of the day. I think people can get a lot out of it. It's just having a mindset that's open to it as well. I'd be
yeah.
curious to know, you've obviously had a very interesting background, but you must have had some special mentors or inspirational people that have guided you. If so, is there
Mhm.
one or two people that you could share, and what have they taught you about business or life?
The first person I'd like to mention is Li Lin Chin.
Oh, I love her.
I love her
Don't tell me you're
too.
related or something really cool.
I wish she could be my best friend, but she doesn't know who the hell I am. uh, I love her because she's not afraid to be who she is. She's comfortable in her own skin. She's got a sense of style, and most of all, she's Asian. So just growing up, she was the one of the only ethnically diverse people on TV. And
She
for
really
me,
was. She was groundbreaking, and
yeah,
like you say, she just was herself. She didn't try to fit in, if you like.
that's right. She didn't try to fit in the mold. And for me, little me, that was really powerful. And I find that even today it's still like that as well. Like I was in Canada recently and all the news anchors were diverse. And then I go back to Australia, it's all the same. And
Yeah.
then it just makes me feel like, well, what if I wanted to be a presenter? What if I wanted to, I don't know, be on TV or something like that? Like, no one would consider me. No one would even consider me on The Bachelor because they all look the same.
Well, you don't need to go on The Bachelor, I'm sure. That's a great example of someone who you perhaps haven't met but has inspired you along the way. And do you have any final top 3 tips or 2 tips or 1 tip for anyone out there who wants to get on top of the politics of diversity?
Sure. So, firstly, do unconscious bias training. I think everyone would benefit from it, no matter who you are, where you work, or what you do. It would make our community a lot more kind and inclusive. I know that sounds a bit woo woo, but it's true.
I'm all for more
Recently,
kindness. I think there's not enough of it out there, particularly in the business
yeah,
and political realms.
and in business, in social media as well, I think people have forgotten to be empathetic. To give you an example, I'm part of a few mum groups, and some of them have like memberships of 20,000 people or something like that. So, as you can imagine, it would be quite diverse. And then some of the comments that they make, which, I mean, if I was to put myself in their shoes, I understand from their cultural point of view. But some of the comments, if you read it, and I shouldn't read it, but I do because I can't help it, I'm all like worked up. Some of them are just really nasty. Like people have just lost it. They forgot how to be human. So yeah, do the training. And if you're organising any events or panel of speakers, just think about having a diverse lineup.
Oh, I'm big
I think
on
that's
that.
really important.
Yes, I've
Yeah,
worked in events over the years, and we have rules of, particularly if it's banking or finance or somewhere that's, there's not a lot of women at the very top that want to do public speaking, but we try and encourage it. We try and have at least 30%. No sausage fest, so no men only.
yeah,
And just ages as well. So not thinking that just you have to be grey haired to have authority on stage as well.
yeah. And also the way we think about speakers as well. Like it doesn't have to be someone that is like a CEO or in the C-suite. Like I think everyone has a level of influence, no matter where they are within the organization, like what sort of level. It's just just look at their achievements and make sure that it's a diverse lineup. And another tip would be the change you want to see. A lovely quote from Gandhi. Bit cheesy, but if you want to support women, buy from them, support their
Absolutely.
business.
Yeah.
If you want to support more culturally diverse leaders, or to have more culturally diverse leaders, try mentoring them or sponsoring someone in your organisation who has leadership potential. So, I mean, they're just small changes, but it can make a lot of difference.
It's been fantastic to have you on the program today. If you want to connect further with Cathy, there will be some details on our show notes. I wish you all well in your diversity
Thank
journey,
you.
Cathy, and thank you so much again for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you for having me on the show.
And episode 76 marks the end of an era. Season 1 of The Politics of Everything will be pausing here. I'm taking a break for the rest of the year, and I hope to be back next year with some new guests, new ideas, and perhaps even a brand new show. Thank you so much for listening so diligently over the past 15 months since I aired The Politics of Everything. Your comments, your support, your downloads have all been much appreciated. We've reached several thousand regular listeners, and I'm so grateful. I hope you enjoy the last episode of the show and feel free to go back to earlier shows to maybe reflect on some of the amazing guests and opportunities that The Politics of Everything has presented for you, for me, and for the world. Until next time, keep well. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed The Politics of Everything, we thrive on feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network and your friends and family. I'm also always on the hunt for fabulous new guests, so if you've got a view to share and an idea how to get our listeners excited, please email me at amber@bespokecoms, that's BESPOKECOMMS.com.au, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time.